In a small, quiet town surrounded by green hills and dusty roads, there lived a woman named Emily. She was different from most people because she couldn't hear. Born deaf into a deeply religious family, her life had always been shaped by silence. But this wasn't just any ordinary silence, it was the kind that made her feel like an outsider in her own world. Emily grew up watching everything around her but never truly being part of it. While others laughed at jokes or sang along to songs, she sat quietly, piecing together conversations through lip reading and gestures. Her father, Reverend Carter, was a well-known preacher in their community. He had a booming voice that could fill an entire church hall, and his sermons were filled with fiery passion about faith, hope, and miracles. Everyone admired him except maybe Emily. You see, despite all his talk about God's power to heal and perform wonders, Reverend Carter never once prayed for Emily's ears to be healed. Instead, he often told her that her deafness was God's plan. At first, as a child, she believed him. After all, how could she question someone who seemed so sure of what God wanted? But as she grew older, doubts began creeping in. If God could do anything, why hadn't he fixed her hearing? And why did her father seem so comfortable leaving things the way they were? Life went on though. Emily learned to adapt. She became incredibly observant, noticing tiny details that others missed. People sometimes joked that she saw more than they did, even without hearing. But no matter how strong she appeared on the outside, deep down, she carried a heavy weight. She longed to belong, to experience the sounds of laughter, music, and raindrops tapping against windows. Yet every time she brought up her desire to hear, her father would dismiss it, saying, "Faith isn't about asking for what we want. It's about accepting what we're given." Then one day, everything changed. Out of nowhere, Emily received news that shook her life completely. A distant relative she barely knew had passed away and left her a massive inheritance. Suddenly, Emily found herself with more money than she ever imagined possible. Overnight, she went from living modestly in her father's house to owning luxurious properties and having access to opportunities she'd only dreamed of. But wealth didn't fix her loneliness. No amount of fancy cars or expensive clothes could fill the void inside her. In fact, the richer she became, the more isolated she felt. Most people treated her differently now, not because of her deafness, but because of her newfound fortune. They either fawned over her or envied her, but very few understood her struggles. One evening, Emily attended a charity gala hosted by one of her business associates. The room buzzed with chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses. Everyone seemed happy and carefree, but not Emily. She stood off to the side, sipping water and watching the crowd. That's when she noticed him, a boy, probably no older than 13, standing alone near the entrance. There was something unusual about him. His eyes scanned the room with a calm intensity, as if he were searching for something or someone curious. Emily walked over to him. When their eyes met, she felt a strange connection, almost like he already knew her story without needing words. Without hesitation, the boy stepped closer and mouthed 3 words that stopped her in her tracks. "I can heal your ears." At first, Emily thought she must have misread his lips. How could this child possibly know what she'd been longing for her entire life? And how dare he make such a bold claim? Before she could react, the boy smiled softly and nodded, as if confirming that yes, he meant exactly what he said. Confused but intrigued, Emily decided to give him a chance. She motioned for him to follow her to a quieter corner of the venue. Once they were alone, the boy introduced himself as Daniel. He spoke slowly, making sure Emily could read his lips clearly. "I've been waiting for you," he said, his expression serious yet kind. "Waiting for me?" Emily echoed silently, her heart pounding. "Why?" Daniel hesitated before answering. "Because I can help you hear again, but it won't come without a price." The word price sent a shiver down Emily's spine. What did he mean? Was this some sort? She shook off the thought. This boy didn't seem like someone trying to trick her. Still, skepticism lingered. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked, mouthing each word carefully instead of answering right away. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out notebook. Flipping through its pages, he showed her sketches of intricate symbols and notes written in shorthand. "This is my gift," he explained. "It's something I've had since I was little. I don't fully understand it myself, but I know it works." Emily stared at the notebook, unsure whether to believe him. Part of her wanted to walk away, dismissing the whole thing as nonsense. But another part, the part that still dreamed of hearing, urged her to stay. Finally, after a long pause, she nodded. "Okay," she mouthed. "What do I need to do?" Daniel smiled faintly, as if he'd expected this answer. "Just trust me," he said. Then, taking her hands in his, he closed his eyes and began whispering softly. Though Emily couldn't hear the words, she could feel a warmth spreading through her body, starting from where his hands touched hers. For several minutes, nothing happened. Just when she started doubting again, a faint sound pierced the silence. Soft hum, like wind rustling through leaves, her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, other sounds followed. The creak of floorboards beneath their feet, the distant murmur of voices from the gala, and finally, Daniel's voice, clear and steady. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she realized what was happening. She could hear. Not perfectly, not yet, but enough to know that her life would never be the same again. Overwhelmed with emotion, she hugged Daniel tightly, unable to form words. All she could manage was a whispered thank you, which sounded strange and foreign. Coming from her own lips, when she finally calmed down, Emily looked at Daniel with awe and gratitude. "How did you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling. He shrugged modestly. "Like I said, it's a gift. But remember, not all gifts come from where you think they do. Some truths are hidden deeper than others." His cryptic response left. Emily puzzled, but she didn't press further. For now, she was too busy marveling at the miracle she'd just experienced. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would uncover secrets far darker and more personal than she could have imagined. The night after the gala, Emily couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions and emotions she didn't know how to process. She kept replaying the moment Daniel had placed his hands over her ears, whispering those soft, unintelligible words. The warmth she'd felt wasn't just physical, it was like something inside her had shifted, as though a door that had been locked for years had finally creaked open. But what unsettled her most was Daniel's parting comment, "Not all gifts come from where you think they do?" What did he mean by that? Was this miracle really divine intervention, or was there something else at play? And why had Daniel chosen her? These thoughts swirled in her head as she lay awake in the quiet darkness of her bedroom the next morning. Emily woke up feeling different, not just because she could now hear faint sounds around her, but because she felt a strange sense of purpose stirring within her. For so long, she'd lived in the shadow of her deafness, believing it defined her. Now, for the first time, she wondered if maybe it had been preparing her for something greater. She decided to visit her childhood home. It wasn't far from where she currently lived, but she hadn't stepped foot inside since moving out years ago. The house still stood tall, its white paint peeling slightly under the relentless sun, surrounded by towering oak trees. To Emily, it was both familiar and foreign, a place filled with memories she wasn't sure she wanted to confront. As she walked through the front door, the smell of old wood and dusty books greeted her. Everything looked exactly as she remembered. The worn-out sofa in the living room, the framed Bible verses hanging on the walls, and the large wooden pulpit her father used to practice his sermons. But now, instead of feeling comforted, she felt uneasy. Something about the house seemed heavier than before, as if the air itself carried secrets waiting to be uncovered. Emily wandered into the kitchen, where she found her mother sitting at the table, knitting quietly. Her mom looked up when Emily entered, surprise flickering across her face. "Emily?" she said softly. "What brings you here?" I needed to see the house again," Emily replied hesitantly. Hearing her own voice aloud still felt surreal. She paused, then added, "Mom, can we talk?" Her mother nodded, setting aside her knitting needles. "Of course, dear." "Sit down." They sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window behind them. For a moment neither spoke. Then Emily took a deep breath and began. Do you ever wonder why Dad never prayed for my hearing too? To be restored? Her mother froze, her hands resting motionless on the table. After a long silence, she sighed heavily. Your father, he always believed your condition was part of God's plan. He thought it was a test for you and for us. But what kind of test is that? Emily pressed, her voice trembling. Why would God make me deaf just to teach me patience or faith? That doesn't make sense. Her mother looked away, guilt etched into her features. I don't know. Emily, sometimes I questioned it too, but your father, he's always been so certain about these things. He says God works in mysterious ways. Emily clenched her fists beneath the table. She'd heard this excuse countless times growing up, but now it felt hollow. If God truly worked in mysterious ways, why did her father act like he had all the answers? Why did he preach about miracles while refusing to seek one for his own daughter? Before she could say anything more, her mother reached out and placed a hand over hers. There's something I should tell you, she said quietly. Something I've kept hidden for years. Emily's heart skipped a beat. What is it? Her mother hesitated, tears welling up in her eyes. When you were younger, about 10 years old, we met a traveling healer who came to our church. He claimed he could cure any illness or disability through prayer. Your father invited him to stay with us for a week, hoping he might help some of the congregation members. Emily leaned forward, her pulse quickening. And? He offered to heal you, her mother continued, her voice barely above a whisper. He said he could restore your hearing completely. But your father refused. What? Emily gasped, shock rippling through her. Why would he do that? Her mother shook her head sadly. Your father was afraid. He said if a miracle happened outside of his control, people might start questioning his authority. They might think he wasn't truly connected to God. So he turned the healer away and told everyone the man was a fraud. Anger surged through Emily like a tidal wave. All these years, she'd believed her deafness was God's will, but now she realized it was her father's choice. He'd let his pride stand in the way of her healing. How could he justify such selfishness? How could he claim to serve God while denying his own daughter the chance to live a full life? Tears streamed down Emily's face as she processed this revelation. Her mother reached out to comfort her, but Emily pulled away. How could you let him do this? She demanded, her voice breaking. You knew how much I wanted to hear. You knew how hard it was for me. I'm sorry, Emily, her mother sobbed. I tried to convince him, but he wouldn't listen. I didn't have the strength to stand up to him. For a long time, Emily sat in stunned silence, her mind reeling. She felt betrayed, not just by her father, but by the entire foundation of her upbringing. Everything she'd believed in had been built on lies. Her faith, her family, her identity, all of it crumbled before her eyes. Eventually she stood up and wiped her tears. I need to go, she said firmly. I need to figure out what to do next. Her mother nodded, looking defeated. Be careful, Emily. Your father won't take this lightly. As Emily left the house, she felt a storm brewing inside her. For years, she'd accepted her fate without question, trusting that her father knew best. But now, armed with the truth and the ability to hear, she vowed to expose the hypocrisy that had shaped her life. Whatever it took, she would make sure no one else suffered because of her father's greed and pride. Later that day, Emily returned to her mansion, her mind racing with plans. She called Daniel, hoping he could offer guidance. When he answered, his voice was calm and steady, as always. You're ready to fight back? He said simply, as if reading her thoughts. Yes, Emily replied, determination burning in her chest. But I don't even know where to start. You already have everything you need, Daniel assured her. The key is to listen to yourself and to the truth. Once you do that, the rest will fall into place. His words gave her courage. Over the next few days, Emily began gathering evidence of her father's deceit. She hired private investigators to dig into his financial records and discovered shocking details: embezzlement, blackmail, and rumors of suppressed miracles, all orchestrated to maintain control over his congregation. With each new piece of information, Emily grew stronger. She realized that her journey wasn't just about seeking justice for herself. It was about giving a voice to those who had been silenced by fear and manipulation. And for the first time in her life, she felt truly alive, though the road ahead would be difficult. Emily knew she couldn't turn back. The silence she'd lived with for so long had been replaced by clarity, and with it came the power to change not only her own life but the lives of countless others. The days following her discovery felt like a whirlwind for Emily. Every new piece of information she uncovered about her father's actions weighed heavily on her heart, but it also fueled her determination. She spent hours poring over documents, listening to recordings, and piecing together the puzzle that had been hidden from her for so long. The more she learned, the clearer it became. Her father wasn't just a preacher, he was a man consumed by power, greed, and fear. Emily knew she couldn't take this fight alone. Though she had money and resources, she lacked experience in navigating such a delicate situation. That's when Daniel reappeared, almost as if he'd been waiting for her to call him again. He showed up at her mansion one evening, carrying nothing but his worn-out notebook and an unwavering sense of calm. "You've done well so far," he said as they sat together in her study. "But exposing someone like your father won't be easy. You'll need proof, not just whispers or suspicions." Emily nodded, clutching a stack of papers in her hands. "I know, that's why I hired investigators. They've already found some things." "Disturbing things." She hesitated before continuing. "He's been stealing money from the church fund for years. Not just small amounts, huge sums. And there are rumors that he silenced people who tried to speak out against him." Daniel listened intently, his piercing blue eyes never leaving. "That's a start," he said. "But you'll need more than financial records. People trust your father because of his image. If you want to break that trust, you need to show them who he really is." Emily frowned, thinking hard. "What do you mean?" "I mean personal stories," Daniel explained. "Stories from people whose lives he's ruined. Stories that hit close to home. Your story will matter most, but others can help too." This idea made Emily pause. She hadn't considered reaching out to others who might have suffered under her father's influence. It seemed risky. What if they refused to speak? What if they were too afraid? But deep down, she knew Daniel was right. Her father's web of lies extended far beyond their family. It touched countless lives. To bring him down, she needed Eli's. Over the next few weeks, Emily began reaching out discreetly to former members of her father's congregation. Some were hesitant to talk, fearing retaliation or public shame. Others, however, opened up readily, eager to share their pain. One woman recounted how the Reverend had pressured her into donating her life savings after promising divine favor in return. Another man spoke bitterly about how his marriage fell apart after her father accused him of lacking faith during a sermon. Each story added another layer to the portrait of a man who used religion not to uplift but to control. As Emily collected these accounts, she started noticing patterns. Her father preyed on vulnerable people, those desperate for hope or healing. He manipulated their fears and insecurities, convincing them that their struggles were punishments from God unless they obeyed him blindly. For years, no one dared challenge him because he held so much sway over the community. But now, armed with evidence and courage, Emily believed she could shatter that illusion. One evening, as she reviewed the testimony she'd gathered, Daniel walked into the room. "You're close," he said, glancing at the piles of notes scattered across the table. "But remember, timing is everything. When you confront him, make sure everyone is watching." Emily looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" "He thrives on appearances," Daniel replied. "If you expose him privately, he'll find a way to twist the narrative, to paint himself as the victim. But if you reveal the truth publicly in front of the entire congregation, it'll destroy his credibility." The thought sent a chill down Emily's spine. Confronting her father in front of hundreds of people would be terrifying. Yet, it also felt right. This wasn't just her battle anymore. It was about giving a voice to everyone he'd wronged. Still, doubt lingered. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked quietly. "What if they side with him?" "They won't," Daniel assured her. "Not when they hear the truth. Just stay strong, trust yourself. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A week later, her father announced a special Sunday service titled Faith Restored. According to the flyers distributed throughout the town, it would focus on miracles and answered prayers, a fitting theme, Emily thought bitterly. She decided this would be the perfect moment to strike. On the morning of the service, Emily arrived. Early, her nerves stretched taut like piano strings. She wore a simple yet elegant dress, wanting to look composed despite the storm raging inside her. As she took her seat near the back of the crowded church, she scanned the faces around her. So many familiar ones, neighbors, friends, acquaintances, all looking up at her father with admiration. How long had they clung to his words without questioning their truth? When the Reverend stepped up to the pulpit, his presence commanded attention. His deep, resonant voice filled the hall as he began his sermon, weaving tales of divine intervention and unwavering faith. Emily clenched her fists tightly, trying to steady herself. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say countless times, but now, faced with the reality of the moment, doubt crept in. What if she stumbled? What if she froze? Then, midway through the sermon, her father paused dramatically and turned toward the audience. "Today," he declared, "we celebrate the power of faith. We celebrate those who have trusted in God's plan, even when it seemed unclear." That was Emily's cue. Rising slowly from her seat, she walked toward the center. Her footsteps echoing softly in the otherwise silent room. All eyes turned to her, confusion rippling through the crowd. Her father stared at her, his expression unreadable. "Father," she began, her voice trembling but clear. "There's something I need to say." Her father's smile faltered slightly, but he gestured for her to continue. "Of course, my child." "Speak." Emily took a deep breath. "For years you've preached about God's miracles and divine plans. You've told us to accept whatever hardships come our way, because they're part of His design. But what happens when those hardships aren't God's will? What happens when they're caused by human choices?" A murmur spread through the congregation. As people exchanged puzzled glances, her father's face darkened, but he kept his composure. "What are you talking about, Emily?" "I'm talking about me," she said firmly, her voice growing stronger. "You told me my deafness was God's plan. But I recently learned the truth, that a healer once offered to restore my hearing and you turned him away. You refused, because you were afraid of losing control, afraid of people seeing you as anything less than perfect." Gasps erupted from the crowd as heads turned back and forth between Emily and her father. The Reverend's mask of confidence cracked, revealing the anger beneath. "How dare you accuse me of such things?" he snapped. "This is blasphemy." "No," Emily countered, holding up a folder filled with documents. "It's fact. I have proof of everything, the embezzlement, the manipulation, the lies. You've built your empire on deceit, and it's time for the world to see it." The room erupted into chaos. Some people shouted in disbelief, while others demanded answers. Her father tried to regain control, raising his hands and calling for silence, but his authority was crumbling before their eyes. For the first time, he looked small, vulnerable as the commotion swirled around her. Emily felt a strange sense of peace. This wasn't just about revenge or justice. It was about reclaiming her voice and helping others find theirs too. Whatever happened next, she knew she'd done the right thing. The moment Emily revealed her father's secrets in front of the entire congregation, it felt like time froze. The church hall, once filled with the Reverend's booming voice and the murmurs of devoted followers, erupted into chaos. People gasped, whispered, and shouted questions at each other. Some stood up from their seats, craning their necks to get a better look at Emily or her father. Others sat frozen, too stunned to react. Her father, who had always seemed larger than life, suddenly looked smaller. His face flushed red as he struggled to regain control of the situation. "This is nonsense," he bellowed, his voice trembling with anger. "Emily, how dare you accuse me of such lies in front of everyone? Have you forgotten who I am?" But Emily didn't flinch. She stepped closer to the pulpit, clutching the folder of evidence tightly in her hands. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was her chance not just for herself, but for all the people her father had hurt over the years. She couldn't back down now. "I haven't forgotten who you are," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "You're my father, yes, but you're also someone who has used fear and manipulation to control others. You've told us that God works in mysterious ways, but what you really meant was that you wanted to keep your power. You turned away a healer because you were afraid of losing control. You let people suffer, me included, because it suited your plans." She paused, letting her words sink in. The room grew quieter, though tension still crackled in the air. A few people nodded slowly, while others exchanged uneasy glances. Her father tried to interrupt, raising his hands to quiet the crowd, but no one listened anymore. Emily opened the folder and held up the first document, a bank statement showing large sums of money transferred from the church fund into personal accounts. "This isn't just about me," she continued. "It's about every single person here who has trusted you blindly. Look at this. These are funds meant for helping the needy, for building schools and shelters. Instead, they went straight into your pockets." A collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Someone near the front row muttered, "Is this true?" Another person stood up and demanded, "Explain yourself, Reverend." Her father's composure shattered completely. He pointed a shaking finger at Emily. "You think you can destroy my reputation with these accusations? Where did you even get these papers? Who put you up to this?" "It doesn't matter where I got them," Emily replied firmly. "What matters is that they're real. And so are the stories of the people you've hurt." She gestured toward a woman sitting near the middle of the hall. "Ask her. She gave you her life savings after you promised her prayers would heal her sick child. Did you ever tell her that prayer alone wouldn't cure cancer?" The woman's eyes widened and she buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly. Nearby, a man stood up, his face red with fury. "That's right," he shouted. "And what about me? My wife left me because you called me faithless during one of your sermons. Was that part of God's plan too?" One by one, voices joined in, each sharing their own pain and betrayal. It was as if a dam had burst, releasing years of suppressed anger and frustration. Her father stumbled backward, his usual confidence crumbling under the weight of the truth. For the first time, he looked not like a powerful preacher, but like a man cornered by his own sins. Despite the whirlwind around her, Emily felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about exposing her father. It was about freeing everyone from his grip. She raised her hands to quiet the growing uproar. When the noise finally subsided, she spoke again, her voice softer but full of conviction. "I didn't come here today to destroy anyone," she said. "I came because I want us all to see the truth, not just about him, but about ourselves. We've been living in fear for too long, letting someone else dictate our lives. But faith shouldn't be about blind obedience. It should be about love, kindness, and standing up for what's right even when it's hard." Her words hung in the air, heavy yet hopeful. Slowly, people began nodding in agreement. Some wiped away tears, while others hugged their neighbors. The atmosphere shifted from outrage to reflection, from despair to determination. Her father, however, wasn't ready to give up. In a desperate attempt to salvage his image, he grabbed the microphone and shouted, "Don't listen to her. She's been deceived by outsiders. This is a test of your loyalty to me and to God." But his words fell flat. No one moved. No one cheered. Instead, they stared at him with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. The days following that explosive Sunday service felt like a blur to Emily. Her father's fall from grace was swift and brutal. Once the truth came out, there was no turning back. The church council convened an emergency meeting, and after hours of heated debate, they stripped him of his title. News of the scandal spread quickly through the small town, leaving shockwaves in its wake. People who had once revered Reverend Carter now avoided him altogether, unable to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the reality of his actions. For Emily, it was both a victory and a loss. She had exposed the truth, but at a cost she hadn't fully anticipated: her relationship with her father. Though she had always felt distant from him, part of her still clung to the hope that deep down, He cared for her. Now even that fragile bond seemed broken beyond repair. When she visited their family home one last time to collect her belongings, she found him sitting alone in the dimly lit living room, his face lined with exhaustion and regret. "Why did you do this?" he asked bitterly, his voice hollow. "Was it worth ruining everything I'd built?" Emily hesitated before answering. She wanted to lash out, to tell him exactly how much pain he'd caused, not just her, but countless others. But instead, she chose her words carefully. "This wasn't about revenge," she said quietly. "It was about justice. You taught me to believe in God's will, but your will became more important than anything else. I couldn't stay silent anymore." Her father didn't respond. He simply stared at the floor, defeated. For a moment, Emily felt a pang of sadness, not for the preacher who had manipulated so many lives, but for the father who had let his own fears and pride consume him. She turned away, knowing there was nothing left to say. In the weeks that followed, Emily began rebuilding her life. With her inheritance and newfound purpose, she decided to use her resources to make a difference. She founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping people with disabilities gain access to medical care, education, and support. It wasn't just about giving them opportunities, it was about showing them that their voices mattered. No matter how society tried to silence them, the organization quickly gained traction, thanks in part to the attention surrounding her public confrontation with her father. Media outlets covered her story extensively, portraying her not as a victim but as a symbol of resilience and courage. People reached out to her from all over the country, sharing their own struggles and thanking her for inspiring them to speak up. Through it all, Daniel remained a constant presence in her life. He would appear unexpectedly, offering guidance or encouragement when she needed it most. One evening, as they sat together on the porch of her mansion watching the sunset, Emily finally worked up the courage to ask him the question that had been nagging at her since their first meeting. "Who are you, really?" she asked softly. "How did you know what to do for me, and why did you choose me?" Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the golden hues of the fading sunlight. "I'm just someone who sees things differently," he replied cryptically. "As for why I chose you, let's just say I could sense the strength inside you. You've always had the power to change your life, you just needed a little push." His answer left Emily with more questions than answers, but she didn't press further. Deep down, she suspected that some mysteries were better left unsolved. What mattered most was the impact Daniel had made on her life and the lives of those around her. Months later, Emily stood on stage at a fundraising gala for her organization. The room buzzed with energy as donors, volunteers, and beneficiaries celebrated their collective achievements. As she looked out at the crowd, she felt a surge of gratitude for the people who had supported her journey, for the lessons she had learned along the way, and for the gift of hearing that had changed everything. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today," she began, her voice steady and clear. "For most of my life, I believed I was defined by my deafness. I thought it was something I had to endure silently. But what I've come to realize is that our struggles don't define us. They shape us. They teach us empathy, resilience, and the importance of using our voices to stand up for what's right." She paused, scanning the faces in the audience. Some nodded in agreement, while others wiped away tears. "When I faced my father, it wasn't just about exposing his lies. It was about breaking free from the fear and doubt that had held me captive for so long. It was about proving to myself and to everyone here that we all have the power to create change, no matter how impossible it may seem." Applause erupted throughout the room, filling the space with warmth and hope. Emily stepped back from the podium, her heart swelling with pride. She had come a long way from the quiet, isolated girl who once watched the world from the sidelines. Now, she was leading a movement, a testament to the fact that, even in the darkest moments, light can emerge if we're brave enough to seek it. Later that night, as the event wound down, Emily found herself alone on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The cool breeze carried the distant hum of traffic and laughter, sounds she had once only dreamed of experiencing. She closed her eyes, letting the symphony of noises wash over her. Behind her, a familiar voice broke the silence. "You've done well," Daniel said, stepping beside her. Emily opened her eyes and smiled. Thank you for everything. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. Remember, this isn't the end. There's still work to be done, both for you and for others. I know, she replied, her tone resolute. But for now, I'm grateful for where I am. They stood there together for a while, watching the stars twinkle above the city. Then, without another word, Daniel turned and walked away, disappearing into the night as mysteriously as he had arrived, though she missed his calming presence. Emily knew she didn't need him anymore, not in the same way. She had found her footing, her purpose, and her voice, and she was ready to keep moving forward, one step at a time. As the lights of the city flickered below her, Emily whispered a silent thank you to Daniel, to herself, and to the universe for bringing her this far. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them. After all, she had already proven that even in the quietest moments, the loudest truths can still be heard if you're willing to listen.